Hello friends, welcome back. Been a while since I've looked at this drawing, but it looks like everything is in place where it's supposed to be, and we're getting ready to refine it a little bit better. I think that's what the last thing I said I was going to do was. So I think the first thing we're going to do today is maybe try to tighten up the pencil a little bit, and then if I'm feeling particularly ambitious, we might start doing line work. But the first thing I'm going to do is just go lightly over this with an eraser in some parts and tighten up the lines. Another way you could potentially do this is to, treat it almost like a pre-ink layer where you fade the pencil layer down and then go do another pencil layer on top of it. I don't know. I don't really like doing that. When I first started drawing, I do everything digitally now. When I first started drawing, I was a pencil and paper guy, so a lot of that kind of process has stuck with me throughout the years. So I do tend to kind of keep doing those kind of traditional rudiments when it comes to doing the pencil eraser stuff in the sketch phase. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but it does tend to be how I do it. So I get my kneaded eraser. My tools are all screwed up right now. I've got my pencil, I got my kneaded eraser. Size is decent. Size on this is giant. The colors are wrong. In true me fashion, I just jumped right into recording today. Alright, so we'll start with the head. Now that we're paying a little bit closer attention to detail, I could be a little bit more fiddly. In the early stages of this drawing, I kept talking about how I didn't want to spend too much time in any one area. And the reason for that being that, I was trying to figure out kind of the broad strokes, so to speak, of the drawing, and trying to figure out, the composition, where I wanted the parts and pieces to be, what I want the parts and pieces to be. Now that I've got that more or less figured out, and I don't want to commit too hard to that because you never know. But now that I've really got figured out that I want the head to be here, I want the skull to be here, I want the weapon to be the skull, I want to do knees up. I know the way I want the face to be pointed. Now that I've kind of figured out all of those things, I'll be a little more comfortable diving into some of the detail stuff. So that's what we're going to kind of be doing today. As a result, we'll probably end up with a finer point on the pencil. The worst thing that happens to me, and it does happen to me a lot, is when I start to refine something, I'll find that I liked it better at the rough stage. And I often think to myself, why does that happen? And I've talked about this a bit before, where it's like you have a really rough sketch, and because it's so rough, your brain is able to fill in the gaps of what you think it should be looking like. And so even though nobody else can see that, that's what your brain sees. And so when you start to refine something, maybe some of the imperfections start to reveal themselves in a starker contrast, and your brain can no longer fill in the gaps and say, oh, this is what I want it to look like up here. It starts to become more real on the page. And so that is why you might have that. And the solution to that is to keep working the drawing until it looks closer to what you want it to look like. I remember one of the things that I was not particularly happy with when I was working on this rough thing was the nose, but we will do some work on that. So the artifacts left behind from the rougher pencil are important. You don't just want to erase everything, right? You want to leave something behind so you can see what it was that you were doing, what you were thinking, but create a more refined version of that. And more refined in this particular sense means thinner, more precise lines, which is something that I have struggled with. But something that I talked about in the Tomie drawing, if you haven't checked out Paneling, my other series, do go watch that. The episodes are kind of long, but it's a really fun show. And in that show, I take panels from comics that I like, and I try to learn something by reproducing them freehand. But anyways, in those Tomie episodes, I talked a lot about how, you know, you gotta trust your pencil. And I failed myself in a couple of areas on that because I realized as I was getting into the inking process that the pencil that I made was not entirely trustworthy, right? The lines were not necessarily precise in the way that they needed to be for me to quickly go across and do the ink. Because really what you want to be able to do is kind of do the ink by rote, based on the roadmap you lay in the pencil. You don't want to have to make decisions necessarily at the ink stage. You kind of want all those decisions to have been made at the pencil stage, so then you can just go through and do the work. So we'll try to do a slightly better job of that this time. You know, this whole thing is about learning. Of course, I use the eraser when I think the artifact is worth preserving. I use the undo button when I want to obliterate all evidence of the error I have made. The ability to look at something in the moment and say, that was a mistake, and immediately wipe it from existence is important. And that is something that takes a surprisingly long time to develop because it runs entirely counterintuitively to other advice that I've given, which is when you're not happy with something, to stick with it and develop it. And you kind of get those impulses confused early on in the going. You kind of need to develop that instinct when you have something that is got the spirit and just needs to be developed, or when you've got something that's just a straight up mistake and needs to be completely demolished. It's a little easier to pick those out at this stage because kind of know what we want the lines to look like, and so it's a little easier to make those decisions. Something that I discovered as I was playing Hades 2 is that this wreath around her head is a wreath that goes around her head, as opposed to what I thought it was looking at the official art, which is two leaves kind of perched on the side of her hair. But much like her brother Zagreus, this wreath is supposed to go all the way around. So we just add a couple of little leaves in the back to show that. I am still playing Hades 2 with some intent. Getting a little better at it. You know, it's funny. I've started describing the. So when I watched YouTube back in the day, I love the like old school LP channels. You know, probably the best example of that being like I messed up my tool. I started using the marker instead of the darker pencil. That's okay. I didn't mess up that bad. But I used to like, I really liked the Super Best Friends channel, kind of back at the height of that. And pretty much everybody who was involved in that channel is somebody that I still follow on YouTube, just because they're calming presences. But I like that format of just like people talking while they do something that they enjoy. And I like video games, but I'm not good enough at video games for me to want to subject you to that. I am, I think, good enough at drawing that I would want to subject you to that. So that's kind of the vibe that I want. Is it's like an old school LP channel, but for drawing. Maybe, just maybe, such a thing would be fashionable again. Never been one to chase trends, which is good because I'm very bad at chasing trends. But I'm personally, and I'm yet to be proven, but I have the faith that if you pursue what you truly enjoy and what you are truly passionate about, there's always a chance that the world will at some time catch up to you, and you'll get your time to shine. That's the hope, anyways. What else can we do but hold to hope? I do like roguelike games, like Hades. Not just from a gameplay loop perspective, because obviously such a thing is very important, but just from a philosophical standpoint of every time you fail, sure, you have to start over, but with increased knowledge and experience of having gone through the game, and if you're determined enough, you will eventually succeed. Somebody brought up Ship of Theseus in the comments. Which is a fun one. If you're not familiar, Theseus, Greek hero, throughout his travels he had a ship, you know, and the thought experiment is that Theseus leaves the harbor from Greece on his ship and goes on this great adventure. And throughout his great adventure, his ship is repeatedly damaged, and every time his ship is damaged, he uses new materials to repair the damage. Now, when the ship returns to Greece at the end of his adventure, he has damaged and repaired every part of the ship so that none of the materials that the ship was composed of when it left the harbor are still on the ship when it returns. And the question is it still the same ship? It's a head scratcher. Because Theseus was always the captain, Theseus never changed the name of his ship. Theseus just repaired the damage whenever the ship was damaged. And as a result, all of the materials of the ship were swapped out. So is it the same ship? I say, yes. Because think about it. And this is where it starts to get really dodgy, right? because it's a thought experiment. But you can think about it in terms of like yourself, right? Your experiences, how much of you materially or even mentally is the same as the you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, depending on how old you are. So I say yes, it's the same, because yeah, you learn and grow and change, but the spirit and the driving force behind your life, the mission remains the same for the most part. Whereas like, but is that really what I believe, or are we perhaps just too frightened to consider the possibility that our core essence is altered over time into something different? And even as I work on like a drawing like this, right? All these lines are being altered and changed from the original. Is the drawing that I started the same drawing that it will be when I finish? As a core concept? And it's here's a real head scratcher. It's a digital drawing. Does it exist at all? I'm going to leave you with that today. I got more to say on the subject, but you have to come back tomorrow. So look, what did we do today? What did we accomplish today? Well, the face looks a heck of a lot more refined, right? When I come back to do the ink, that's going to be really easy to scratch out. So pretty happy with that. That's one of the more fiddly parts. And tomorrow we're just kind of work our way down until we get to the bottom of the drawing. Not a whole lot's going to change, but it's going to look better, and then it'll be much easier to ink, and of course after that comes coloring. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. We'll talk more about weird philosophical stuff tomorrow, and I'll see you then.